Why does Sipsmith gin taste so outrageously good? Let me show you. I forgot my drink. You know which city perfected gin? London. You know where we make our gin? Bingo. Gin starts with junipers, and we have the best juniper guy in the business. Nobody even knows his real name. I just call him Juniper Guy.
My name's Craig.
His name is Craig. Bottom part, not good enough. Top part, not good enough. We only use gin from the heart of the batch. Get rid of the rest.
What do we do with it?
I don't know. Even our labels are things of beauty. Who's that guy? Is that me? It's me. Finally, we hand dip every bottle in some sort of magical liquid.
It's just wax.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. So you see, we could make our lives a lot easier. But at Sipsmith, we make gin, not compromises. I wrote that line myself.
Hi, I'm Anistatia Miller. I'm the director of Mixellany Limited, which is a publishing company and consulting company dealing in drinks history. And for the past 7 years, I've been hiding in an ivory tower, which is nobody's seen me for a while, because I've been over at Oxford getting 2 master's degrees, and now I'm on my doctorate and teaching early modern English history, specifically drink history, over at the University of Bristol.
I'm Jared Brown, co-founder and master distiller of Sipsmith Gin in London, and also a historian of drink with Anastasia.
There we go.
This subject, this session has been years in the making.
Literally.
It was 4 or 5 years ago that I first brought a book to Anastasia's attention. It's called The Distiller of London, published in 1639 by the Worshipful Company of Distillers, the Distilling Guild in London that was founded the year before in 1638. In it, we found a recipe that had juniper, orange and lemon peel, spiced back to practically a modern gin formula from around the time that genever was supposed to have arrived from...
Spoilers! Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert, guys! Spoiler alert!
But
okay.
This book was written entirely in 2 different codes.
Yeah.
And Anastasia dove into deciphering this. One was using little astrological symbols, the other a letter for numeric substitution code.
Worse than the Boy Scouts.
And she was well into it when I said one afternoon, oh, did you notice John French in his distilling book 1667 published a deciphered version of this, and ducked out the door as she exploded. But 45 minutes later, I came in and she said,
they're all wrong.
Yeah,
all the French's stuff was wrong.
Thankfully. So she continued, and we did publish that book, The Distiller of London, Deciphered. You can find it online, all proceeds to industry charity. And for us, that book was not the end of this story, but very much the beginning, because that anomalous recipe for a juniper spirit set us on a hunt back in time. And what you're about to find is that the origins of gin completely turned on their heads. So stay tuned for everything you know about gin history to go by the wayside.
In fact, I should probably start sharing our screen so everybody can see what we're talking about, which could be a lot of fun.
This session will change what you think about the origins of English gin. There are major gaps in the knowledge predating the story that it was invented by 17th century chemist Dr. Sylvius in Leiden. So without further ado, let's dive into the early modern English origins of English gin.
First of all, we found links between 16th century Austro-German distillers and early 17th century English advice manuals for housewives.
We have proof that since the 19th century, the term gin was attached to two distinctly different categories of English juniper spirits and about 24 ways to make gin. So sit back, relax, and join us on a journey from Usquebaugh to Aqua Fructum.
Stephen Bailey wrote the introduction to the 50th anniversary book for the Gin and Vodka Association of the UK called Gin. Thing he mentioned is that gin is one of those subjects that attracts myth, and like stories of gin are repetitive. They go round and round and round. His comment introduces this session because we're challenging the claims of people such as historian Jessica Warner, and that's only the beginning, when she said that the English learned about gin from being in the war in Holland, and that the Dutch invented the beverage that they had. Oops, here we go again. Okay. And the experience of English soldiers in the Netherlands in 1750 was mentioned also by John Burnet in his book, Liquid Pleasures, and by John Watney in Mother's Ruin. People have been saying this forever, that the English soldiers learned it, that the Dutch invented it. But we discovered that the usual story that was told.
We're just talking about the whole Dutch courage story.
Yeah, the whole Dutch courage.
Okay, yeah,
I mean, forget
you kind
it.
of blew right through that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea that you got courage by drinking this spirit, and don't worry too much about memorizing that story, because
it's wrong.
As we mentioned, we're going to debunk it.
Yeah, in fact, the funny thing is Jessica Warner, when she mentioned this in an article, in an academic article, said the usual story as told by Thomas Trotter is that the English soldiers would fortify themselves with a dram of distilled spirits before they went into battle. The guy who wrote that she is quoting from wrote what he said in 1804, not in the 1600s. So I started worrying that maybe this was not real.
More to the point, nobody had written it before 1804.
Yeah. And at one point, she also wrote in the same article, Daniel Defoe writes that strong waters first became popular
after the Anglo-Dutch Wars of the mid-17th century.
And that his account was probably closer to the truth. Still has not researched to find out, is it the truth, but does something that was probably
we'll talk more about Defoe later.
Yeah, let's talk about Defoe later, because this really gets ridiculous. But tell them about the real fun one.
Oh, yeah, let's go for a minute to meet the inventor frequently named in these portrayals. Dr. Silvius of Leiden University. This association of Leiden and Silvius with making gin, we found that first made by Thomas Webster and Mrs. William Parks in the 1815 edition of an Encyclopedia of Domestic Economy.
There is no proof that Silvius ever invented anything from records in the 1600s.
But they wrote that Geneva and gin were invented because, among other things, juniper berries were tried by Silvius, professor of Leiden, who lived in the 17th century. They wrote this liquor was accordingly first sold as a diuretic in the apothecaries' shops, but as it was drunk with avidity, it soon became an article of trade. Mind you, nobody said that before these two Americans published this in the United States in 1814.
Yeah. So then in 1960, you see, this is really where it started mind-boggling us, is it took Burton Rouchet to pick up on Trotter's claim in 1960 and wrote, the best evidence points to Franciscus Silvius or Franz de Labeau, well, make up your mind, and that the professor's discovery was an accident of pure scientific research.
So is this where John Burnet and John Watney picked it up?
That's where they picked it up. And so the ball kept on rolling after that. Now, let's go to the OED. Okay.
Discovery was an accident of pure scientific research.
What does that mean?
Not much.
Okay, good. I'm glad you figured that one out.
Not compared to what you'll hear in a little bit.
But now you see, Andre Parent revealed that Sylvius was a specialist in neurology. The Sylvian fissure in your head.
That's the space between the left and right lobes of your brain.
And so he studied nervous disorders. He wasn't doing kidney ailments. Even when we wrote Shaken Not Stirred, we thought that this was all gospel. And so of course the guy was working on kidney ailments. Oh, I'm sorry, that didn't make any difference. But let's go past this. We know now that's it. We know where it comes from. Forget it. Sign it off your memory.
And we know these aren't credible, but they don't quite know it yet.
No, they don't.
You will in a couple of minutes.
You will in a couple of minutes. But there's something very important. Look at the Oxford English Dictionary.
Yes, the OED also declares gin was originally made by Dutch distillers in the late 16th century.
Yeah.
Does this mean English spirit was originally a Dutch import, or is there more to the story?
There's more to the story.
OED does mention an intriguing point when it continues gin's definition, adding, in the mid-18th century, a less coarse, more subtly flavored gin began to be produced in London, hence known as London gin.
So they're kind of running the picket fence.
Except we didn't really see London gin until the 19th century.
Well, but we're going to put it down to let's call
give OED points for trying there.
They tried. They really did try. So when and how did the English learn to make distilled spirits? Aha. Here we come, the fun part. Once upon a time, English distillation was born in the British Isles within the monasteries. The Franciscans, you've heard of the Benedictines, they're really popular in France for making liqueurs and all sorts of fun alcoholic things. They had a lot of information. They were the ones who managed to keep the rest of the world, mostly angry kings who didn't like other people, from burning all of the wealth of information that was around from the Arab world, especially. And they were transcribing this stuff. They weren't supposed to be, but they did. And they would transcribe it into Latin or anything they could find. There's two particular documents from one alchemist, Al-Kindi. He wasn't just an alchemist, he was a philosopher, he was a mathematician, he was all sorts of things. But he detailed a search to find an elixir, to make a digestible elixir that was supposed to promote overall well-being and potentially prolong life. And he used an extract of wine using an alembic. Ooh, does that sound familiar? So wine is distilled in wetness and comes like rose water in color. He had figured out how to distill wine. Lovely topic.
In their quests to replicate Al-Kindi's elixirs, European and British monks extracted spirits and hydrosols using alembics. Many of these formulations combined wine with Galenic medicine compounds of herbs, spices, fruits, vegetables, minerals. As a result, distillation increased the potency of these medicines, extended their shelf life. It was a significant progressive step in the field of medicine.
Ridiculous how well it did. But now we have to come back to the UK. Well, it wasn't the UK then, it was England. It was really England. There was one friar, Franciscan friar, another one of those guys who liked playing around with spirits. And he was an Oxford lecturer. Ta-da! Roger Bacon. Roger Bacon was a pioneer in distillation. When he was teaching at the Sorbonne in Paris, sometime in the mid-1200s, he actually was exposed to the works of two guys that were also at the Sorbonne and at the University of Montpellier. Arnaud de Villeneuve, with how many different ways you say his name, depending on which country you're in, and Roman Noy.
What was that saying? Failure is an orphan, success has many parents. Well, Arnaud de Villeneuve was claimed by the French, the Spanish, the Catalan, and I forget who all else.
Anybody, so North Africans too, for a while there. Yeah.
Do research on him.
Yeah.
You've got to find all the different spellings of his name to find all the information about him.
Yeah, so once he decided, okay, he was going to join more, de Villeneuve was the one who decided that, you know, that instead of using salt or anything else for distillation, let's play with wine again. Joy took it a bit further. He really thought that if you could reduce this substance, that you could make an aqua vitae, a water for life.
Water of life.
Water of life. The funny thing is one other scholar discovered that Bacon back in 1267 said he purchased secret books for about 20 years. And most of them were compilations of recipes and formulas and experiments that were mostly Arab texts. Some of them were also some of the things that were banned, the people weren't supposed to know about, that Rahman Joy had also written and were, I mean, he almost got burned at the stake for being a witch.
Remember, we're still a few centuries before the invention of the printing press.
Yeah,
so if he was purchasing a book, that book would have been scribed by a monk, copied from another book.
Yeah, but it means that the knowledge had made it all the way to Oxford, yay, and made it to England, woohoo! And so we were already into distillation in the 1200s. Quietly, but we were part of it. Now, we also know that it got past the monasteries. We know that it got past everything into something that most of us have heard about at some point or another. Whoops, there. The Liber Uber. You talk about, you know,
confirmation that Bacon's findings raised curiosity within the monastic community is seen in Liber Ruber, fancy language for red book. Latin again.
There's that Latin business again. Yeah.
A series of pre-1360s documents compiled by Bishop Richard Ledred.
Ledred.
Wasn't in Pirates of the Caribbean.
No. You're thinking somebody else.
Okay. Of Ossory, Ireland.
Yeah.
So the Red Book of Ossory is the first British Isles mention of distillation, with Folio 62, a treatise on aqua vitae, which describes the methods for producing.
But look it up. Look up on the screen. Aqua vitae. Even though he called the treatise aqua vitae, it was aqua vitae. He was making it wine.
You are actually looking at the original on the screen, and right up in the upper left, the first two words that you
aqua vitae. Aqua vitae. You see?
Well done.
I know. Terrible. I have to sit around and do this all day. Anyways, but
another document. May I talk about Folio 64?
Oh, of course you can. Okay, you're left.
Contains a tract on different kinds of waters, which is divided into 12 chapters headed with titles such as De Aqua Rubicunda, a recipe ascribed to the 13th century German alchemist Albert Magnus,
who was another one of the Grand Five. We always call de Villeneuve, Joy, Bacon, Magnus, and I forget who the last one was. Why is I always forgetting who the last one is? I'm sorry. I know who it is, but I can't tell you.
So less than a century after Bacon's death, curiosity has reached completely out of the monasteries, and curiosity in the economy led to the extraction of aqua vitae from another more local and cheaper source, fermented malted grain or beer. An entry in the 1494 Scottish Exchequer Roll notes, the delivery was made by Brother John Core by order of Accounts Controller, he says, by order of the king, to make aqua vitae within this account, 8 bowls of malt. You'll hear this in a lot of talks about drink history, but here, you'll see where this leads.
But this is even more important because it makes a connection that most people don't think about. Up until this time, we're mostly talking about distilling wine. All of a sudden, we're talking about distilling malted barley.
And this proves that James IV of Scotland requested Brother John Cole, who was in the king's service to produce a malted barley spirit for His Majesty's consumption.
Yeah.
Replacing wine with beer and distillation was not limited to Scotland or the British Isles, but was practiced and well documented in late 15th century Germany.
Oh, here we go. We talked about this guy back when we wrote Spiritist Journey, A History of Drink, and we talked about
Volume 1.
Yeah, volume 1, and we talked about the first man to actually do a distillation book as early as we've ever been able to find, and I love his name, Michael Puff van Schrick.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, it's a really cool name, but when you also look at the fact, 1476, hello. This is beating everything that we've all been talking about. And for some reason, we weren't stumping it as much as we do now. Now we really want you to get the fact that there's this guy who did this in Austria, and he managed to get the book published in Germany with the beautiful title of Von allen gebrächten Wassern, with 82 herbal distillates. It was originally a treatise. It was written in 1455. He had a recipe for Wacholderbeerwasser, excuse me, Germany. I'm not very good at German, but what it was brandy distilled from wine with juniper berries. Wonder how that happened. And he attributed this to,
sorry, what year?
1455 was when he first scribbled it down.
Okay.
And then he revised it again in 1466.
So we're now looking at juniper spirit in Austria.
Yes.
In 1455.
Yes.
And the recipe appears again in 1466.
Yep.
And
then they finally published the book, which you notice something that's kind of interesting is because the woman it's a woman on the cover, and guess what she's doing? She's distilling. Don't you find that kind of interesting and kind of odd and kind of funny?
Why would that be?
Well, you see, it's
go on.
Okay. Once upon a time.
Come on. You've got a few degrees in this subject.
Yes, well, let's start simple. Let's start simple.
Interested.
Yeah, let's start simple.
If they've made it this far into this video, they're interested.
Yeah, okay. 1476, this book comes out, and people are going, wow, this is a lot of fun. Ooh, we could actually distill things. Ooh. Well, not everybody could afford wine. You're talking, you could tell the difference from of the classes because rich people did wine, poor people used beer or fermented barley. And yeah, fermented malted barley, that's beer. Okay, let's get it down to one word. Anyways, so the irony is that men were making money making this Wacholderbeerwasser. And it was ridiculously popular. There was so much huzzah going on in the German and Austrian governments trying to convince people to go back to drinking wine instead of drinking this spirit, which is making everybody loopy. Anyways, so on top of that, there was a cheaper distillate that these lovely women were brewing up, which was, again, flavored with juniper berries, but this time they were using beer. And it had the great title of Kramerbeerwasser. I love that one. But women were making a juniper distillate from grain. Bottom line. Now, another historian who I actually respect a great deal, B.N. Tusley, decided that the image that you saw of the cover was to warn readers against the abuse of medicines produced by old women. I beg your pardon. But on top of that, it doesn't make any sense really because the book was so popular, women were buying the book. So how could it be that this was supposed to be a warning? It's more like admit the fact that women were producing distillates as much as men were with wine. They were just using what they had most available because they were also the ones who brewed the beer at home. Bump. It's a 1 + 1 + 1. Anyways. Let's get on to the next one. Now, this one is another one that we always heard about. 1500, Hieronymus Brunswick. Good old Hieronymus Brunswick. Again, a German connection.
Yeah, now we're at 1500. Hieronymus Brunswick has just published Liber de Art de distiller.
Libre de arte distillandi.
Always, yeah.
Yes, the book of the Libre de arte distillandi, the book of the art of distillation. Yes, have another sip. It might help. You never can tell.
Libre de arte distillandi.
You're getting better. You're getting better. You're actually getting it at this point.
Latin.
Why?
Just
Why?
to say that. Why?
Don't tell me now.
I was bored.
30 years. See, now he tells me he failed Latin. Oh, good grief. I actually married
But
this
this
man.
book, published in 1500,
Yeah.
and was far more widely distributed than von Schrick's 38 editions.
Von Schrick only had
of his
38
book.
editions. I don't know why Von
But
Schrick gets it.
Brunschwig's book, first translated in Brussels, then in London by Lawrence Andrew, 18th of April, 1527.
We know the
if you
actual
want to
date.
Find the date under
Yeah.
the title, The Virtuous Book of Distillation of the Waters. His recipe for Aqua Juniperi.
Mhm.
Now, okay, 1527, London, English book, Aqua Juniperi.
Mhm.
Where are we in Holland at this point? 1527. I believe we're talking about Geneva being invented in another 75 years or so.
Yeah,
years.
another 50 to 75 years by Lucas Bols, but okay.
Okay,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we've just had a juniper recipe published in London, juniper spirit recipe, 1527.
Yeah, in
Uh,
London. Okay.
Easily researched if anybody wants to check that outside of this, or just take our word for it. It's there.
Or you can go dig like I did. It's really fun.
This was used for treating gravel in the limbs and in the bladder. 1 ounce taken twice daily was said to provoke us the
flowers in women to
and
cause
causes
them to flow. It was supposed to be good for what ails you once a month. Anyways, okay.
Yeah, Brunschwig's and Andrew's work predate by 52 and 27 years respectively.
Yeah, so then
A Low Countries treatise published in
yeah, well,
Holland.
yeah, well, no, yeah, okay. 1552, again, another one that most of us have said, oh, this has got to be it. Ein Konstille Distillerbuch by what is his name? Philippus Ermani, featured a genever bessen or Aqua Juniperi. Yeah, okay, that's nice. I'm sorry, I have to slough that off because obviously we have links that go a lot earlier. Now, there is one that happened a few years ago that we heard about, which I have been also trying to understand. I'm going to read some of this because Dutch-English links to Aqua Juniperi to such as Ermani's formula appear more than once in literature. A recent claim made by Erich von Schoenberg, the book is up there somewhere, it's a huge book, and he suggests an unpublished formula written in Middle Dutch predates Ermani's printed recipe. The tract titled, and you'll see it down on the bottom of the screen, it says, Gebrande wijn te maken, how to make brandy. There's allegedly a missing link in the history, which modern gin producer Maison Villevert claims was written in 1495, exploiting it in his marketing materials. Well, there you go. Anyway, so I was really curious about this. And I thought, there's really got to be something to it. Well, since I've got that beautiful bit of Oxford in me, I had to go dig. And I went to the British Library myself and went, wait a minute, okay, I have to look at the catalog first so I can explain what's going on. Okay, so the online catalog shows the Sloan Collection, MS 345 Compendium. In the compendium, I know there's a big arrow right there. And the reason why, because I want to pinpoint this one thing that says that the formula in question is in a collection of culinary recipes in Middle Dutch, which the Latin heading incipient quem dicta de diuresis confectus et spiritus et syrupus et alias materias. Numbers 639 to 668 includes a recipe for, and it says right there, for gin, parens, or brandy with the heading Gebrande wijn te maken. the marginal rubric Aqua Vitae on folios 51 right and left. Tell him.
However, Willie Brakeman's translation of this 145-page document reveals that recipe number 666 describes the making of 1 pot of brandy distilled from 13 quarts of a mixture of 10 quarts wine diluted with 3 quarts beer. Instructions offer the option of adding either a handful of sage leaves or a curious ingredient called gorsbein or demerara, wrapped in a cloth bag and distilled with the brandy for a second time.
Now, let me interrupt for a second before we talk any more about recipe number 667, is you have to realize that the flaw happens not by anyone looking at the book who can't read Middle Dutch, but by the fact that the archivist who created the catalog entry at the British Library screwed up, made an assumption. In history talk, we call it making an assumption. Amongst the historians who sit there in universities, we say the person screwed up. They shouldn't have said the word gin at all. They did. And so next person who sees this goes, wow, I found a recipe for gin, and it's 1500. Wrong. There you go. Anyways, there's also the 667. Not as much fun as 666.
Recipe 667 details how to make aqua vitae by distilling wine with nutmeg, ginger, galangal, grains of paradise, cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, then redistilling with crushed nutmeg, dried sage leaves, and cloves. And neither formula is a method for making either brandy, a wine distillate, or gin, a distillate containing juniper.
As stated in the catalog. Oh dear, the catalog did it.
Although these recipes could be loosely interpreted as early templates for botanically enhanced spirits, the dating the compilation to 1500 by the library raises another question about the purported ages of these two recipes.
Yeah, because now the compendium contains documents ranging in date from 1260, copy of Arnaud de Villeneuve's tract, and also as late as, was it 1506?
Yeah.
With another tract. So what Schoenberg came up with was an assumption. I hate assumptions. And so between the two assumptions, people go, oh, it has to be 1495. It was documented in 1500. So that, I don't know how they put those 5 years together, but hey.
So the connection to the gin family tree is absolutely questionable until the dates of the material in the entire compendium are verified with archaeological dating techniques, which hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened yet. But well, let's sit down for a minute, because I know that there's some people out there who are going, hey, what about the Polish? What about the Russians? I hear this all the time. What about the Italians? I mean,
honestly, there's a few people going, hang on, you said you'd tell us where gin came from.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
I'm rolling up to it.
You have to bear in mind, she's not going to take the quick route through all of this.
I don't take the quick route.
The exhaustive and unassailable route.
Yes.
This isn't just telling you some cute story, but absolutely proving every step of it.
But I mean, when we look at the fact that we know that anything that was distilled had a longer shelf life. So if you distilled juniper, regardless if you put anything else with it, it had a number of things that people said it was good for, and this went on well into the 17th and 18th centuries. I'll put it that way. But now let's look at where it all started here. 1530s. Let's go to Henry VIII. Let's go to Henry VIII. We got to go to Henry VIII. Let's go to Henry VIII. There he is. Okay. The dissolution of the monasteries happened in the 1530s.
What did that mean exactly?
It meant that the poor people and anybody who needed help when they were traveling could not get free health care. Gee, this sounds like
America. Is what you got at the monasteries.
Yeah, that's what you got. And also it meant that people could not be treated with these lovely discoveries that the monks had experimented with, successfully used what they had discovered from the Arab texts. And even though physicians were around and they were considered to be primary healthcare providers, guess what? Only rich people could afford that. So there was kind of a problem there. After the monasteries were dissolved, it meant that apothecaries, which was a trade that was actually owned by who? The Worshipful Company of Grocers.
Since 1345.
Yeah, we're allowed to prepare medicines and not have any formal medical training. There were another group of people that people don't think about. Women, English housewives. They, like their German equivalents, knew how to distill things with these gorgeous little cold stills. And they made alcohol and they made hydrosol, non-alcoholic waters. And they were doing the same thing that the monks were doing. They were helping people out. They were sometimes called witches because of it. But I mean, this is where you start thinking.
Some fascinating equipment that they had. What you see on here is called a cold still. And what that meant is you didn't need a condensing coil off of it, because when the vapors rose up from the pot at the bottom, which was heated, they would go up into the top, condense just in the top, and fall down. But inside there was a groove that would direct them to the spout. And so this was commonly known as a cold still. Yeah. And it was obviously wasn't going to be expensive. It was something that somebody could commission and they could have, and it was just actually normal. They were made from, as often as not, they were made from pottery. Yeah. So you could have, if you had a kiln, you could make one of these. Yeah. Now, what's the alcohol content, the first distillation on these? Oh, very low. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So maybe something like 20%. Yeah. I mean, but it worked. It did work. But you put it back in, you run it repeatedly, and you could get it up there. About 40%, maybe. Maybe. Well, that's when another fun moment happened in life. We love it when the English crown gets involved in all sorts of things. And one of them was in 1543, Henry decided to pass a bill that persons being no surgeons may minister medicines notwithstanding the statute. What that means in English is if you were not a surgeon, if you were not a physician, if you were not part of that lordly group of people, you could use your working knowledge of herbs, roots, waters, or the operation of same to treat patients with any herbs, ointments, baths, poultices, platters, according to their cunning and experience knowledge, including the manufacture of distillates. This meant official consent, blessed by Henry VIII, that healers without any medical training could continue to care for the sick. That's as simple as it gets. They could, since gentlewomen and housewives had gardens, kept herb gardens, compounded remedies, you wanted your remedies to last longer than 48 hours. So the best way to do that was to start playing with distillates. Two more historians, Margaret Pelly and Charles Webster, figured out there was one medical professional, one physician available for every 400 Londoners by 1600, not including the apothecaries and the gentlewomen and middle-class ladies who knew how to take care of their families on their own. Anne Stobart and Catherine Allen realized that this was considered to be a charity to the poor. So a lot of gentlewomen would say, well, I'll make some potions for them and distill them, and they could actually take care of the poor if they felt benevolent, which occasionally happened. Actually more times than not, really. But again, it legitimized women being distillers. Thank you, Henry VIII. We have to admit, thank you, Henry VIII. Henry VIII replaced hippocras, a wine infused with botanicals, with aquavitae in his royal court. Though the term aquavitae is currently employed in popular literature to describe a brandy, whiskey, vodka. The early modern name was actually applied specifically to spirits redistilled with botanicals. Yeah. But now, don't forget Elizabeth. Don't forget Elizabeth. Love her hair. First popularized another spirit, Aqua Rosa Solis, which she favored as a digestive. This method steeped a mixture of sundew flowers and Aqua compositae. Sundew, those are the carnivorous flowers.
Yeah, Little Shop of Horrors, that one. Yeah,
that one.
those, exactly.
Ugh.
Moo.
Not sure that I would ever use those in a gin, but
Hey, I mean, it's going to work. It's going to work.
20 days with a blend of dates, cinnamon, sugar, cloves, grains of paradise, red rose petals, sweetened with sugar.
And a little bit of gold.
Drinking.
And a little bit of gold. Don't forget the gold. She put gold
But
leaf in that
Elizabeth's
stuff.
appreciation for social spirits went a step further when she granted Richard Drake a patent to produce both Aqua compositae and Aqua vitae as a reward for his service to his uncle, circumnavigator and privateer Sir Francis Drake.
And we also suspect he was the one who first came up with the El Drake, but never mind. That's another story.
Spirits consumption continued to weave into the fabric of the English court's drinking culture with the accession of James I to the throne. His wife, Anne of Denmark, imported the traditional drinking habits of the Danish court that highlighted spirits consumption over wine. And she brought that to her new British home.
Yeah.
From this aristocratic vantage point that social pastime of spirits consumption trickled down and was assimilated in bourgeois drinking culture. This was aided by a glut of advice manuals.
Ta-da! Vice manuals. 153 home remedy books were printed before 1605.
Why?
Because a lot of people knew how to distill, and they just needed some recipes to know how to not just distill, but infuse, do compounds, do all sorts of things.
I was going to give a quick shout out to our dear friend Johannes Gutenberg, but
well, we have to give a shout out to Johannes. Thank you, Johannes, because next to the Bible, the most important book that was printed was Braunschweig's. I mean, you got to say something for that. 100 years later, it's still,
1450 printing press was invented.
Yeah.
1500 Braunschweig's book on alchemy, on distillation was
and everybody
selling
else's
equal to the Bible.
Yeah, but figure by 1605, over 400,000 copies of these advice manuals were printed, distributed. They didn't, remainder them. They actually made them everywhere. Now, again, here we go. Oxford scholar, Peter Morin translated from Latin a work by a Swiss physician, Conrad Gessner. It was published in 1565. You're going to love the title of the book.
A new book of distillation of waters called The Treasure of Euonymus. And
apparently it compounded spirit recipes from Ramagnoy, Roger Bacon, de Villeneuve, Magnus, Jabir, Dabin, Haman, Avicenna, Braunschweig, a whole bunch of people. Quickly to say, there was one in particular called A Most Noble Water of Virtues, derived from, I love this part, from a certain written book. What's certain written book? Okay, go ahead and drive me crazy. Anyways, it's steeped galangal, grains of paradise, juniper berries, fennel seeds, cinnamon, and 11 other botanicals in wine for 14 days. Strain the liquid, grind the macerated ingredients, return the liquid, steep it for 8 more days, and then distill it. Now, that's a long maceration process.
Yeah.
That's a really long one. He also claimed that there was another one that steeped 23 botanicals that came from the emperor's court at Constantinople.
That used juniper, coriander, ginger, nutmeg, cardamom.
Yeah. Why is this sounding familiar?
Yeah, we're now getting very much into gin profiles.
Yeah, here. And then there's another one that had 50 botanicals. Now that's going overboard.
What year was this one again?
Again, 1565.
Published in
England.
Okay, so 1565 published in England, and we've got juniper, coriander, cardamom, mace, nutmeg, cloves, all meeting up.
Yeah.
And almonds, another ingredient in modern gin formulas.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, okay, so when did this come about? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of saying a lot. But now here's my favorite guy. This is my favorite guy. We love him. Hugh Platt. Hugh Platt wrote a book called Delights for Ladies. And this book looks a lot bigger on the screen because it's about this big and about that
it's
wide.
a tiny book. What is it, about 4 inches tall?
Yeah, and 3 inches wide. And it has 3 recipes in it that should be of interest to all of us. The first one is called Aqua Composite. It's the base liquor used for Elizabeth I's Aqua Rosa Solis we were talking about. Again, Gascon wine, 12 hours marination with ginger, galangal, cinnamon. Keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Distilled in alembic, and a pint of spirit can be extracted from every gallon of liquid. The second recipe is going to also bake your noodle. Usquebaugh, Irish aquavit, which is really kind of saying something.
But with licorice and anise seeds in it.
Yeah, it was not whiskey per se, even the way we say Usquebaugh means whiskey, it actually means more than that. Finis Morrison wrote in his travel memoirs in 1617 that the Irish aquavit, vulgarly called Usquebaugh, is held the best in the world of that kind, which is also made in England, but nothing so good as that which is brought out of Ireland. When he discusses the fact that this liquid that got sweetened with a little bit of raisin and fennel. Again, fennel is used as a sweetening, just like licorice. I mean, this kind of says something again, is why is it that Usquebaugh doesn't sound so much like one thing, but it's starting to hint at something else. Now, there's my favorite other Hugh Platt joke, which is the spirit of spices. Tell them about the spirit of spices.
Spirit of spices, rectified wine spirit with oils of cloves, mace, nutmeg, juniper, rosemary, other botanicals with a gentle heat, either in a balneo, a bain-marie, or ashes, meaning what you did was you set the still into a bed of coal and ash, and using an alembic still. Mature it for a month in a closed container, and the result, a most delicate spirit of each of the said aromatical bodies. So there you've got a juniper distillate, 1602, London.
Now let's quickly talk about some stills.
Wait a minute.
What?
Didn't juniper spirit come over during or after the 30 Years' War with this discovery of Dutch courage?
No.
I think we can definitely say it didn't.
Can we make that academic at this point? Can we call it academic, guys? I want to call it academic.
I'm making it plain. You're making it academic.
Okay, I'm making it academic. Let's quickly go through a couple of the stills.
Do we need to?
We have to do it quickly. Oh no, we don't have to. Actually, we don't have to. See, this is your basic hot still. It's a hot still. That's a bucket head still, which is another version on the cold still. And so these were all being done before anybody was thinking about the fact that, you know, they're all sitting there producing juniper spirits and everything else in the world. Now, again, here we go again. I love this. Gervase Markham wrote Country Contentments of the English Housewife. And in that one, he also had, in 1615, another Aqua Composite that has that same sense. But the thing that's fascinating about this one is it was made with ale instead of wine.
That makes sense, because this was the inward and outward virtues which ought to be in a complete woman.
Yes.
So to be a complete woman in this time, you had to be a good distiller.
Now, but you also knew that all of a sudden in 1602, not when William and Mary arrived 88 years later, but in 1602, they were already talking about the commercial value of making it, how to make the ordinary spirit of wine that is sold for 5 shillings and a noble a pint. Good price. Can't complain. So anyways, how did English distillation become a professional trade? Okay, here we go. So Dusty pointed out a lot of things. Let's get down to the bottom line. The linchpin in this whole story is this guy. I know he looks like he's really kind of eccentric. His name was Theodore Turquet de Mayerne, Swiss-born French historian Louis Turquet de Mayerne. studied Montpellier, where all the other people learned how to distill and how everything else in the world happened. He ended up being invited after the King Henry IV of France was assassinated. Darn, and he was the physician. Oh, rats. Came to work with King James I and Queen Anne of Denmark, who obviously really loves spirits. He became a member of the Royal College of Physicians, where he started showing that he was also interested in distillates. Very much so. He helped to establish the Worshipful Company of Apothecaries, a royal charter in 1617, so that the people who were not physicians could continue to make approved versions of different things. The Pharmacopoeia Londinensis gave the recipes for everything that the apothecaries were allowed to make if they were members of the Apothecaries Guild. And that included 2 chapters of distillates. Now, this is the interesting part altogether. Oops, there we go. Oh, no. There we go. Okay. When you realize that they'd already made it to that point of saying, okay, how do you make these things? And they were starting to organize people to make them. There's one person who said, okay, Dutch Geneva, English Geneva. Yeah, by this time, they kind of were both starting to play with it. But as Peter Shaw wrote, the malt stiller gives his spirit a single rectification per se in Holland, and make it up to proof or to be distilled with juniper berries or other ingredients into Geneva or other compound waters for the vulgar. And this all rectification malt spirit made in Holland usually undergoes the method there being able to distill their low wines to full proof spirit and then directly into Geneva. Okay, we can say that all works.
So this makes Geneva, Dutch Geneva, a direct descendant of Aqua juniperi.
Exactly.
The only difference between the two is use of fermented grain instead of wine. One major point of departure between Dutch and English Geneva, noted by Shaw, was that the Dutch had little notion of rectification and the making of double spirit. Rectification is the term used to describe the process of purifying and intensifying a liquid through repeated distillation.
That's what every gin distiller does, is rectify spirit.
Yes.
So there is that initial difference of one has a spirit and adds things to it and then redistills it again versus just taking the beer and adding things to it and making it happen. So it's kind of one of the first problems. The second problem, of course, that Shaw put together is as far as he was concerned, the Dutch used an immoderate use of rye meal in the production of their spirit. The English never used rye in the making of their Geneva or their gin. It was always barley,
and
at least until the 1700s.
Just to remind you what we've been through, it should be very clear that it wasn't that the Dutch arrived with this idea of making juniper spirit. So yes, there was Geneva production on both sides of the channel. Yeah, but very different spirits were being made.
Very different. And in fact, London distiller, here you go, George Smith. Ready? Drum roll, please. Get the book. Oh. Get the book, honey. Go for it.
George Smith.
Go for it.
I dearly love this.
He loves George Smith.
Observations upon Geneva. Geneva hath more several and different names and titles than any other liquor that is sold here in London, as double Geneva, Royal Geneva, Celestial Geneva, Tittery Colonia, Strike Fire, and etc. It has gained such universal applause, especially with the common people, that by a moderate computation, there is more of it in quantity sold daily in a great many distillers' shops than of beer and ale vended in most public houses, with the further advantage that Geneva is saleable the next day after it's distilled, which is not to be practiced in the others. However, it wonderfully improves by keeping, especially when it is full proof, in so much as that some persons distilling Geneva from rectified malt spirits with the usual quantity of juniper berries and laying the goods by for 8 or 9 months, the same has meliorated and become so mellow a commodity that it has been sold at double the price in parcels as preferred to other liquors at dearer prices. But That's not my favorite passage
Oh,
from
go
this
for
particular
it.
book.
Go for it.
My favorite, just the page before his observations on Geneva, he writes, "And for proof of your spirit of wine, put a little gunpowder in a spoon, which fill up with spirit of wine, then set the spirits on fire. And if they be perfectly deflegmated, distilled, they will burn dry and blow up the gunpowder." So that term proof and the idea that it came from putting it on gunpowder to test it, well, there it is in writing.
There you go. There you go. Now, on top of all this, let's keep on adding on to this little problem. Around 1620s or 1620s, there were 200 distillers' shops making spirits of one form or another for whatever reasons they were doing it. And they complained because there were a lot of disreputable distillers, not as good as the other ones for some reason. And they presented a petition in 1621 in the House of Commons saying that they really felt that they had to do something about this British brandy stuff. It was reportedly manufactured by distillers using beer dregs, wine lees, rotten fruit, and almost anything fermentable. Yeah, that would be a problem. And so, there was a little bit of a crabby session there, and it made all good sense, which is why we get back to this guy. I love this picture of him.
Yeah.
He got worried.
He was worried about the reputations of both professional apothecaries and the distillers. So de Mayerne publicly condemned the rising denigration of the trade by this current disorderly and inordinate intrusion of interlopers into the practice of this art, who by their preposterous ways of working and frequent use of base and unsound materials have brought scandal not only upon the works of this art, the wares, but on the art and the artists themselves.
Drum roll, please.
In a campaign to preserve the credibility of the city's commercial distillation trade, de Mayerne obtained a second royal charter in 1638, establishing the Worshipful Company of Distillers as the organizing body mandated to monitor and regulate commercial distilleries in London. In Westminster, 21-mile surrounding radius, just as he did for the apothecaries, de Mayerne edited and published, in association with livery co-founder Thomas Caedmon, Standards Manual for
who was King James's doctor, by the way, since de Mayerne was the Queen's doctor.
Oh, you've got the page with the cipher on it. It took a while for her to get a hold of this one, but here's what she had to work from to decipher all the recipes.
Yeah.
So if you had the word invocators with a Y, then
you could figure it out.
Get the numeric codes.
You could figure it out.
Here was all the giveaway of the ingredients codes.
Yeah.
And let's see, which do we have? Is that?
That's an ounce.
No, but what's the symbol?
Oh, Leah.
And down here for dram, the symbol is?
Taurus.
And the gilliflower?
Jupiter.
And the rapeseed? Mercury?
No.
Oh, what is that?
No, that is Virgo.
Oh, Virgo. Yeah. So odd choice of symbols to use as codes, but there it was.
And with 34 recipes. Tell them about the 34 recipes. The 34 recipes. We know there's three in particular you really need to look at.
Yeah.
Number 31.
Mm-hmm.
Which when you look at it, it says right up there, take Rosa Solis and add juniper berries to it. Gee, really? And sassafras
you're not
roots?
talking about that recipe for pink gin, are you?
Yeah, kind of.
So you may have noticed that pink gin has been a hot topic over the last few years. And it's funny that nobody has talked about the fact that it's not new.
Yeah.
Because here, de Mayerne and Caedmon have people distilling juniper with orange and I'm on a different recipe.
Oh.
I want to talk about that.
I know. I want to try to get. Why is this going? Sorry. There it is. There we go. There it is. Right there.
That's
That's it.
Is it?
Yeah, that's 26.
That's the one I want.
31. You want 32,
I
33.
want 30.
There we
there's the
go,
one,
33. All
This is
three
the
of
one.
these, though, have juniper predominant recipes.
Yeah, and they do. But this one,
Yeah,
let's
okay.
take a look at this.
Okay.
Juniper berries, quince and pippin pairing. So that's apple peels, which is a real interesting touch. But the next ingredients, orange and lemon peel.
Mm-hmm.
And then nutmeg, anise, cloves. So you've got right here, juniper with citrus peels and spice support. It doesn't get more modern gin recipe than that.
Well, you made some.
Oh, yeah. I've got
Yeah.
some around here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he made
so-
some. That's for fun.
Looks
Yeah,
like
we got a few
that,
few of them
but,
running around.
Then what they did was, after distilling into proof spirit, to the spirit add strawberries and raspberries bruised, stir them well together, and after YS days, check the code,
Yeah.
it being clear may be drawn off, then dulcify it with syrup, as hereafter is taught, meaning a simple syrup, which he taught in this book. So
Mhm.
you've just colored it bright red or bright pink with strawberry and raspberry. So the first time
Pink gin.
we find juniper meeting orange and lemon peel in a spice structure
Pink gin.
was a pink gin.
Pink gin, pink gin. But now, another interesting book came along right after this members only. I love it. Members only book is the Queen's Closet. Queen's Closet opened. Excuse me, 1655. And again, we're talking about the same recipes, but this time we're talking about using middling beer. Middling beer is table beer. It's not strong beer, so it's a sort of in betweenish, not even small beer. Small beer was really heavily diluted, and they used that to make a lot of the spirits that you saw in the Worshipful Company's book. So this kept on going for a while. Oh, and yeah, and here's another that Peter Shaw business again. Here we go. So with the livery sanction, there were juniper predominant pallets. They did not resemble the water of juniper sold by apothecaries that was also very popular, not for medicinal purposes. And Peter Shaw said the bruised berries of the juniper among the malt and brewing them together, whence they procure a compound tincture, which by fermentation and distillation alone affords a spirit much more intimately homogeneously impregnated with the essence of the berry than that prepared in the common way of distillers. Ooh, is that pompous or is that pompous?
But it certainly says it.
It says it, and in comparison to what was being done by non-livery members and non-reputable apothecaries, such as the one that was found in the 1752 medical essays, Mr. Godfrey affirms that in 1735, the gin commonly sold in London is made by distilling 30 gallons of water, 10 gallons of lamp spirits, and a quart of turpentine oil.
I've tasted this.
Yeah.
Stick with botanicals, trust me.
Yeah,
That-
you really want to.
That was rough.
It's some rough stuff. So, okay,
Who coined the word gin?
who came up with it?
Bernard de Mandeville, 1714, first applied the term in his book of Fable of Bees,
Yes.
or Private Vices, Public Benefits, in which he lamented that the infamous liquor, the name of which derived from juniper in Dutch, is now in frequent use in the laconic spirit of the nation from a word of middling length, shrunk into a monosyllable, intoxicating gin that charms the unactive, the desperate, and the crazy of either sex, and makes the starving sot behold his rags and nakedness with stupid indolence or banter, both in senseless laughter and more insipid.
Yeah, let's get
Wow,
on to
he
Daniel.
went on a bit more, but
Remember,
anyway,
remember Daniel Defoe? We were talking about him before. He actually identified the people who produced cheap gin, the stuff that we call the gin craze, a sort of petty distiller who made up those compound waters from such mist and confused trash. Ooh, doesn't that just insult everybody? Anyways, let's get down to William and Mary, 1688, often cited for what they do. Sorry to say, the Dutch, all they did was they brought over some genever, but we already had our own, so I don't know, why not? It gave you something to do. So what put an end to all of this? Tell them.
I don't really want to talk about that.
The columns still.
Yeah, it's not so.
Well, we all know about the columns still. Let's get down to the stuff that's really fun. This guy.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, 1 second on the column still.
Yes.
A lot of people know Aeneas invented it in 1831, but we tend to overlook that it was invented a couple of times before then.
By Adams and also by Cellier Blumenthal.
Yep.
The
was
gentleman.
That 1813 and 1818, I believe.
Yes.
And so, yes, coffee did invent one, but it was simply a light modification on theirs.
Yeah, but now let's get down to this guy, who's my other favorite guy, James Sheridan Muspratt. He decided he was going to interview everybody and look at everybody's industrial works, from coal manufacture to alcohol to everything. What we found in that book, which was published in 1860, is a fat book.
If you're looking for one historic book for alcohol, for distillation, for gin formulas, Muspratt's Chemistry, 1850.
Volume 1, not the other ones.
Probably find a digital copy on Google Books.
Inevitably.
Sort of and you'll find all of these. But
now the reason why we want to look at these very quickly is because by 1860, there were still 6 styles that he noted by talking to prominent distillers for things like British gin, cordial gin, a variation on cordial gin. Then there was plain or London gin by 1860. But the one that really looks legitimate in modern day, if you look at it, is fine gin. That's more like what you normally see to this day. And adding a little bit of liquors to impart color and sweetness. I mean,
distinct origins in that recipe that you saw in the Distiller of London from 1639.
Yes. Now, there's only 2 that really more resemble what we would call Geneva or Dutch Hollands, and that's West Country gin, which means even by the 1860s, there were still nefarious people using sulfuric acid or oil vitriol to make their gin. Those darn people in the West Country, versus the way that the Dutch Hollands was made. Obviously, it was just one distillation off, sometimes adding hops, which was very fascinating. At the bottom line of all of this is what we're saying is sometime between 1476 and 1860. Yeah, okay, there were a few Geneva styles that were mentioned that made it into England eventually, but look at the insane number, 18 recipes out of the 25 we've discussed from the 1590s all the way to 1860 that more resemble what we know as gin. Bosh.
Wait, you got Muspratt as 1860 here.
Yes.
1850.
Oh, sorry. I was only looking at the 1860 book. Apologies.
Wrong edition.
Wrong edition.
Okay.
But anyways, look at how much was developed. And look at the fact of how much of it was developed before 1688 with William and Mary. This is what we're trying to say, is that there were 2 different styles of gin. There were 2 different categories of gin, rather, not styles. I take that back. There were 2 different categories of gin. One was made the Geneva style. The other was made the London dry gin style. So however you want to look at it, go ahead, argue with me. It was invented in England. It came through from a bunch of different sources, but eventually it came to England. It was distilled by women even more than men for a long period of time, because we're talking stuff made with beer, meaning malted grain.
There is no denying that both nations produced beautiful juniper spirits, beautiful traditional juniper spirits. Both nations have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah.
But I think we can put to rest the story that English gin came about after Dutch genever arrived in England, as you've seen throughout all of this.
It's a new thread to look at. It's definitely a new thread to look at. It's a way of seeing other things, and as I say, I welcome somebody else to find something more than what I found and dug up, and more than he's tried and figured out how to do. But that's it.
Please,
we're done.
Keep digging. There's
Yeah.
always more to find in the history of
There's,
drink.
well, even better. Like, there's one thing that all historians know in Oxford: history is not written in stone.
Now, I should say one last thing.
One last thing.
Anastasia and I are longtime fans of George Burns and Gracie Allen's
Oh,
work.
here we go.
They were real role models, icons for us. And so for 20 odd years that we've been doing presentations together, we've always finished them with this quote from Burns and Allen. And this is the first time that we've ever done it while working with someone named Grace, who is doing production for Tales of the
So
Cocktail.
what are you trying to say, George?
So say goodnight, Gracie.
Good night, Gracie.
Thank you all so much.